What's up, everybody? Hi, welcome to Nerdist Book Club live on Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTube, as well as Geek and Sundry's Twitch. I'm Hector Navarro, and today we've got a very, very special guest joining us. She is a professional host, voiceover actor, journalist, and podcaster, including on Marvel's Voices for Marvel. Ever heard of it? Of course you have. It's Angelique Roche. Angelique, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. I'm with my people. I'm with the nerds to talk about the nerd things.
Yes,
Yeah.
you absolutely. And before we get into it, because we got some real good nerd stuff to talk about, I'm such a huge fan of you, Angelique. If you could, because I would love for people to know about this in case they don't, can you just very quickly tell everybody about Marvel's Voices? Because it is a rad, multi-format thing that exists, and it's super cool.
Marvel's Voices is pretty incredible, and it's one of the 4 shows that I host right now, including a show called Brave New Pod for Sci-Fi Wire, and a show for the Green Space in New York, even though I'm no longer in New York. But Marvel's Voices is a diverse place to talk to all of the cool fans, creators, and just amazing people within the Marvel universe about their stories, how they came about their stories, their background, and why they're so passionate about storytelling. And there's so many cool things that I can't talk about that are coming, but there is also Marvel's Voices in print. And so we are coming out with some really cool stuff coming through. And so, yeah, so you can check out the podcast wherever you listen to, podcasts.
Well, please do that. Thank you again for being on the show. Like I said, I'm Hector Navarro, and my normal 2 wonderful co-hosts who are here every week with me are Nerdist Editor-in-Chief Rachel Heine and Geekbomb's own Maude Garrett. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Dr. Nick. Sorry, you said it.
This is going to be a good episode because we have an amazing guest, and we also have some amazing stuff to talk about. Thank you all for at home right now for watching us and for joining our live book club. We always discuss new and favorite books with us in real time, and we love to do it. So a huge thank you to everybody watching right now at home via the internet. It means a lot to us, so thank you. Angelique, first question. Your favorite Marvel character, Monica Rambeau, is that correct?
Oh, someone did their research.
A little bit. I said I was a fan. Okay, cool. Awesome. Next question. Angelique, what are some of your favorite books and genres? And have you read Lovecraft Country before we kind of talk about it?
So I, like many other amazing people in genre, just got the book. While I'm not a stranger to Lovecraftian horror. I did just get the book, and I have been speeding through it. Normally, my loves are vampires, so I'm a huge fan of Anne Rice, huge fan of Justin Cronin's Passage series. And I love me a good sexy vampire. You can at me, I don't care. I'm a big Richard Matheson fan, so I love good suspense, good horror, good thrillers, although Matheson is more of a philosophical reflection of the human psyche. We can have a long talk about I Am Legend and how it has never been done correctly. And I really do love a lot of good fantasy novels. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of Afrofuturism. Lots of new books coming out right now. So I can name a dozen folks. Literally, I have 2 new books right here.
Water Dancer, Children of Blood and Bone. Awesome.
And The Ray Bearer that just came out, which are all on my list of things in which to read, as well as some Lovecraft. I wasn't a huge fan at first, but now I'm just curious about some of the source material, and so I'm gonna go back and read some Lovecraft.
This really feels like the best of Lovecraft. It feels like the hits is what we're reading, and I'm not even that familiar either. But it really does feel like this is a good primer for if you do decide to get into it. And if you weren't into it before, we got some great comments in the chat already. Game Wizard 001 says, "Yay, special guest! Always happy to have guests." Gaming X-Wing or Gaming NYX Wing, nice. 38 says, "Welcome to the club, Angelique." So getting some love in the chat there. We have a ton to talk about. I feel like we can kind of gloss over the
Hold on, I got a question for chat real quick. Did everyone watch episode 2? I have 7 minutes to go and I'm itching. But is everyone watching the show? Like, is everyone up to date with the show? Did we watch episode 2? How are we feeling about that? The differences, the good chat. Let's chat about that. Cool.
Okay.
Back to you, Hector.
I think that Journey Smollett said it quite appropriately on Twitter. Misha gives no S. She is gonna ruin your favorite characters. No one is safe. Everything you thought was gonna happen, you don't know. I don't know anymore.
Yep.
And I'm reading the book.
Mm.
Yeah, they're making some really interesting changes. I also want to say, Angelique, you named like all the genres that we individually all love. Like I'm a big
fantasy.
Horror, thriller, vampire, suspense. Hector, obviously, our comic book guru, and Maude, fantasy. So
hang on, Maude, are you drinking some bad wine? What was that face?
Well, I said it was a Moscato, and I know that it's a dessert one and it's sweet, but like it just sugar-coated my face for a moment there, guys.
Okay.
But it will get better with every sip. That's what wine usually does.
That's true.
It does.
I'm already sweet enough that I couldn't even say it.
Well, do you guys want to start with a comparison between the show and the book? Because we have a very interesting, Angelique, in case you don't know, we have a little bit of a split party between the three of us normally. We have folks who are hardcore, read the book before the adaptation, before watching the adaptation. And I'm on the side of watch the adaptation before reading the book, which I know is the minority. I know that it's oftentimes not the popular stance to take. So they tricked me into reading this book and getting ahead of the show.
It wasn't on purpose. I will say sometimes I do watch the not if I've already read the book.
Yeah.
You don't go back for a refresher?
I can't make a decision about that, I guess.
Right.
What Jurassic Park ruined me.
Predict. It's hard.
Jurassic Park ruined me.
Yeah. It's really hard, but I also think, and might be so. I have this fun thing called aphantasia where I can't really visualize in my mind's eye. I know it's very strange, and I love reading, and I sort of like consume. Almost like I'm processing it instead of seeing it, and so I think adaptations don't bother me as much because I'm not like picturing so and so in my head. It takes me a long time to like figure out who my fan castings are. Like I don't know, they're just but yeah, we didn't intentionally. At least I didn't intentionally trick you, Maude. You have an evil smile.
It's fun because
that's just my face.
Yeah. No, it's the Moscato.
I realized recently, because I have been listening and reading a lot more books in downtime, I sometimes picture in watercolors, I picture in anime and animation, and I use like different art mediums to kind of like put my vision into motion. It's not like Hector where it's like there's a director's chair and it's just shot and it's all people. Mine are often not all people. Mine can be a computer game character, an anime character, it's weird. But I caught myself out because I was kind of like drifting there in my thought, and I was like, you just pictured like literally a water painting. I was like,
that's
wow,
cool.
That's so fascinating. I should probably stop drinking and save these brain cells.
Well, it looks like the chat's a little split as well. Jimmy Sprinkle says, book first, TV second for me. Nathan S says, Hector's on the correct side. Thank you, Nathan. It's okay. We don't have to take sides. I want to go back to this for a second. Angelique, when you said Jurassic Park ruined it for you, do you mean because you prefer the movie or because you prefer the book?
Movie's better than the book.
So I need to be very clear. I am a huge Jurassic Park franchise fan. I just finished rewatching the first 3, and yes, I said 3. I did watch 3 voluntarily. It's a lot. But I read Jurassic Park when I was in 7th or 8th grade, before the movie. I'm aging myself. Before the movie came out. And then I watched the movie and I was just like, all right, I guess.
I've never heard of someone having that experience.
I have.
Because when I read a book, and this has gotten worse as I've gotten older, I do have vivid image. Like in my brain, I am seeing, even if you didn't describe the slacks, I'm seeing the slacks, I'm seeing the background. Like Roxane Gay's Untamed State. Like it took me forever to get through Octavia Butler's work because it is so visually because I kept seeing the visceral images. And so I had in my mind's eye a very different manifestation of John Hammond. And I did not necessarily like the much nicer grandpa from the movie.
This is great.
I needed him to be a little bit shadier.
Wow. That's fascinating to me. Because when you first said Jurassic Park ruined it for you, I had at first assumed I feel like the common thinking for Jurassic Park for a second is that like that's one of a handful of book to movie adaptations where the movies will be mostly considered better. We've talked about this before. It's like that. It's like The Princess Bride, Jaws, The Godfather. There's like a handful of movies that are just such good movies that it's going to be better than the adaptation. But I'm glad I asked you about it because I'm like, you know what? Knowing Angelique, knowing like what a true blue nerd she is, I bet she's on the side of the book is better, which is amazing, which is great. Oh man.
I thought Jurassic Park and Lost World, especially Lost World, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Much better.
What's your ranking for the movies so far with the 5 movies? Go.
I mean, Jurassic Park is 1, like, period. I don't care. It's like Michael Keaton will always be my Batman. Jurassic Park will always be my Jurassic Park. And then, oddly enough, Lost World.
I'm a Lost
World. And then
fan.
Jurassic World.
Okay.
That would be my top 3. And then the rest of them, Jurassic Park 3 is like my Batfleck.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
at the bottom.
Right.
Ben Affleck should never have been Batman. That's just a whole nother conversation.
I like to
with that theory and going with your analogy, which movie is George Clooney's plastic nipples?
Ooh, that would be. My brain is blanking on the one that came out after Jurassic World.
Fallen Kingdom.
Yes.
Fallen Kingdom. That would be the plastic nipples.
Makes sense.
Because you're like you're gonna go back for just because of your friend dinosaur blue. Like really? That's why we're going back?
Blue?
And then we're gonna have an auction?
An auction? Bad dinosaurs on the I was
sorry, I know, Rachel. I know it's
I
bad.
was so upset. I thinking about it.
Yeah, here's a great comment from the very appropriately named Clever Girl. They said, I have to think of them as 2 separate works. If I compare them too much, it ruins one or the other. That's interesting. See, I love the act of adaptation, the whole process. I'm like fascinated by it. So I to go back to Lovecraft, I think we're in such an interesting place right now because in this book club, we're about halfway through the book. There's only 2 episodes out for the show. So we're ahead of the episodes we're ahead of the season for a little bit. And I think that anytime I'm watching, I did the great thing of I waited to start reading the book until watching the first episode. So I had no idea. And these 2 amazing readers definitely started reading and then, caught up with the HBO show. So I watched the first episode and had that fill my brain. What an amazing first episode. And then that's kind of informed how I've been visualizing the rest of the story. But I can't help when I watch the first 2 episodes or the second episode and going forward, that I'm absolutely thinking about why they made certain changes, for story reasons, for the fact that it's 2 different mediums altogether. Like, I know we were talking about this before we started rolling, but like some of the lines of dialogue and some of the moments that are said by some characters are kind of reworked to then be put into a conversation between 2 separate characters, but like it's still there. And I just think it's very, very interesting. So I would love to just get everybody's take on so far how they're enjoying the differences. Do you have a preference right now for the show or the book? Just what are your overall thoughts right now?
Angelique?
I would say I think it's interesting. Like, I think I like that they're 2 very different works. one of my things that I really love about the work that I get to do is that you get to see the origin, like the source material.
Mhm.
Like, for instance, we were talking about I Am Legend, like it was written by Richard Matheson, but there's been 3 different, very different adaptations of that source material. I think I've got to give a lot of credit to Monkey Paw and Misha and the entire cast for like really capturing the spirit of the book. And I mean, even with the dialogue and like the shift and like the adding of Letitia in certain places, like I love the fact that Letitia is driving the car instead of George. Like in my brain, there is a lot of perspective that's being put in clearly from the writer's room, which is clearly a diverse writer's room that is taking the source material and hitting things harder, placing it in the moment in time we are in our country, but also like broadening the positions of power, which makes me really excited for this chapter, one of the chapters we read today, Witch House, because if it's gonna go anything like it did in the book, and we already have such an amazing character in Letitia on the show, what is about to happen? Yep. Right? So I have to separate them, right? I don't necessarily prefer one to the other because you can hear the separation of the voices while sticking to the core material. It's great.
Well said. Antonio Vargas says, Letitia is my favorite character. And I believe her full name is Letitia fucking Lewis. So we just have to make sure we get it right every time we write it in the chat.
Well, here's the thing.
You may get timed out. Sorry.
It's even better in the book. Her last name is Dandridge. For those who are huge Hollywood fans and fans of Dorothy Dandridge, won an Academy Award for Carmen. For that name to be used, there's so much symbolism in the book. Anyway, so either way, it's Letitia fucking Lewis or Dandridge, and both of them are appropriate.
There we go. Rachel, what are you thinking right now between book and show? How are you feeling?
I love both, and I totally agree. I think that the spirit and the dread that you feel throughout us from mostly just America and these racist cops and cultists and neighbors and white people, and you feel that dread, but you also feel this sort of, I love a good mystery. I love solving a puzzle. And the further we get into the book, the more I'm trying to connect the dots between the Winthrops and the Braithwaites and all of these, kind of not just Lovecraftian, but very pulpy sci-fi, even like the booby traps and things like that, where you have to figure out all of these different pieces together. I love that. I'm really enjoying the show. And I knew that they made changes in the first episode, but the last episode I thought was so well adapted that they gave much more for Uncle George to do, for Courtney B. Vance, because just that whole episode, I was like, give him an Emmy for just this one, done, the end.
I have 7 minutes to go, and some people haven't seen it.
I'm just saying.
Courtney B. Vance needs an Emmy. I agree.
Yeah, that's all. This episode is amazing, and also the way that they played around with magic, the visualizations of the magic and the wizard sort of deal going on, and the memory changes. And
I liked that because of the control. It was another way that they were being controlled. Yeah.
It sort of lends Atticus to it doesn't seem as easy. I feel like in the book, not that it's easy, but that we were saying that the pacing was interesting because we didn't realize when we started it that there are these sort of vignettes of moments.
I want to talk about that for a second too, because after the second episode of Lovecraft aired, a lot of people I saw online talking about how the first episode felt like the first episode of Lost, and then episode 2 felt like the penultimate episode of Lost. Like it just went to the craziest, zaniest cult. Like it went to a place where I think a lot of TV viewers have been, myself included, to be conditioned to be like, wait, that's the finale. What's happening here? Not knowing, you know, what the rest of the book and the rest of the season and the rest of the story is going to deliver. So yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, just to close out, I just thought that the way that they moved around roles and how they sort of envisioned this house and how they were treating them, and also the flip from Caleb to Christina, I think is genius.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
so good.
Maude.
I agree.
About just people who are oppressed still oppressing others, and not having that mentality that you are doing exactly what you're experiencing. And I'm just, after reading this section too, I'm really interested to see what they do with the Winthrop House and Christina and the Museum of Natural History and that whole situation. Again, without spoiling what happened in the last episode, things have changed in the show that I'm very interested to see what the dynamic is.
Yeah.
So Maude, you've been saying, I misunderstood. You've been saying you have 7 minutes left to watch of episode 2.
That's it. I've only got the last 7 minutes. Like, and at the moment, Tick's like, you know,
That is a very very important 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Wes is saying in the chat, hopefully Maude finishes the last 7 minutes before the after show. I think I may have to.
We may have to finish this show 7 minutes early just so that Maude can immediately hit play and watch it.
That would be really lovely.
And then do the after show. Okay, so we're shooting for 5:53 is what we'll shoot for.
All right, thanks, guys. That's teamwork right there. There are 2 specific moments that we've covered in the book that have appeared in episode 1 and 2 so far.
Yeah.
So I won't say it too spoilery, but I'm always going to prefer the book because there is a lot more exposition. You are understanding the characters more. It's like you understand their expressions, and there's just so much more material to be able to understand.
Yeah.
I really do love the show. I love the character interactions. I love Letitia as well. Like I think that's so well done. And I love the visuals. I love how sharp and cut everything is, like how the close-ups, like that's amazing. The first monster scene was better in the book.
Really?
Yeah. I actually prefer, yeah. I felt it was a little, like I understand it was like a horror concept, but like the fact that like biting and the, God, go away, fly. Like the biting and the sheriff transformed quickly, that I didn't love. And there was something about the whole discovery that these monsters were only going after the white people, and there was something there that I thought was really quite interesting because it
in the book, right?
Yeah. It was like, wow, this is such an unlikely ally, but I liked that moment, and we didn't quite get it in the show. And then the other moment, you know how last week I said I love the dinner table. I usually love dinner table scenes where someone makes a spectacle and like there's a war of wits. I feel like when George was making the distraction by kind of like unraveling all the information and clues, I feel like that was done better in the book.
I will have to agree. I did like the way Atticus said, "Get the fuck out," though. Like there's something about Jonathan Majors and him opening up his mouth in general to say smart things that I'm a fan of. I think it's interesting. I liked the gore of the show a little bit more with the monsters.
Yeah. I think I'm also interested in like Lovecraft, and I haven't read a ton of, I think I've read one short story a million years ago, but I've read and watched a ton of Lovecraftian things. And there's this idea that what is scary, and I totally identify with this, is like that you can't even comprehend it. It doesn't even, it's what I imagine actually encountering an alien would be like. Your brain would just like not, because they're not gonna look like little green men, because we don't have the same environment. There's no way, unless they're way out, unless we're talking Battlestar Galactica, and then that's a whole other situation. But and so I did like the first monster section in the book because, and also in both parts in the last chapter, because you don't really get you're like, he understands that he's not going to be himself, and that it isn't necessarily death, but it's a sort of death because it's your personhood. And that, just like to think about, was really fun. But then the visuals and the gore and the pulpiness of the show, and the fact that so many pulp or novels that ended up being published were originally short stories, or these little bits that got added together. So that, I like that in the book, and I feel like we're also probably going to get that sort of vibe, maybe a 2-episode arc per story, something like that, or one for the witch. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see, because of that, I'm excited to see what happens with Witch House.
Yes, yeah, me too. And the preview looked really great, but let's dig into this section, because
Let's do it. This is a highlight section. Miss Necromancer says, the Witch House has been my favorite part so far. It was so good. Chaotic Looney says, I'm a book person because when I read, it makes a movie in my mind. Nobody has yet made a movie as good as my mind does from a book. I totally get that, Chaotic Looney, but again, my stance has always been, I have a terrible imagination, and Steven Spielberg can outdo this oftentimes. That's my take right there, is that you give it to the right people, and I'm like, that's way better than what I thought of in my brain. WJ Baggins says, does anyone else get a classic pulp heroine vibe from Letitia, like a swashbuckling archetype, or is it just me? Which I think is very, very interesting. Great question, great comment. Let's talk about Witch House. This second chapter is Dreams of the Witch House. Just a little summary. They're back in Chicago. And it was weird the way that the book sort of glossed it. Like the TV shows, I'm sure going to do the same thing, where it's just like, well, we went through this incredible thing, but whatever, we're back to normal. Which is like, wait a minute, you guys just went through, this is now,
I mean, processing trauma is different for everyone.
Exactly. So Letitia receives an anonymous check from someone who owed an old gambling debt to her father. She and her sister Ruby, who we have seen in the show up to this point, but I don't think we've seen in the book yet, decide to buy a supposedly haunted house in a white neighborhood, and Letitia hires Atticus as a handyman in exchange for room and board. So here is another example of Jim Crow laws in housing in the United States. This was very, very common. Every step of the process is made as difficult as possible for Black Americans. And even when they're able to buy the house, they are harassed and attacked. I mean, this is all stuff that I know we were talking a little bit about this before, with like everybody's different personal life experience with history. With when you're raised in the United States, you learn U.S. history, and it's very different than U.S. history. There's a lot of the stuff that's obviously left out. But when you learn about these things, I feel like, unfortunately, you learn it and you go, yeah, that makes sense, but it's something we never covered. But it would make sense that there's all of these, these horrible laws that were in place, and then just the practices and everything. So though Jim Crow laws technically ended, redlining is a modern form of this injustice. So then back to what's happening in the story, the Winthrop house. Is it Winthrop or Winthrop? Winthrop?
I said Winthrop, but I feel like I also have a Southern accent. Don't come. I shouldn't be the judge.
Okay. All right. What I feel like.
I would say Winthrop, so it avoids that altogether. Winthrop.
I'm going to defer to your expertise, Angelique, because Louisiana is still closer to Illinois than California is. I'll just go off of what you said. So if it's Chicago, sure. It was originally.
We talk about the Great Migration. Louisiana is really just in Chicago.
There we go. The Winthrop house was originally built by Hiram Winthrop, who lived there with his son. In the house, there's a handcrafted model solar system, which Letitia gives to Horace. One of the changes between the show and the book is that Horace is the son, versus in the show we have a daughter.
Her name's Diana.
In the show, Diana.
Yes.
And Horus, isn't Horus the Egyptian sun god? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, very cool.
Oh, there's so much integration of
raw.
like biblical work and Egyptian.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
dope.
Like Death's brother, I don't know. He's an Egyptian god. I don't remember. But yeah, Diana is Hippolyta's, or Hippolyta.
Hippolyta.
Is Hippolyta or Hippolyta?
I think either. I
feel like they say Hippolyta in the show.
No, they say Hippolyta. I just saw it.
They say Hippolyta. Okay.
They do say
but
Hippolyta.
Also,
sounds like someone who keeps a lighter at their hip.
Hippolyta.
That took me too long, but that just reminds me of in Santa Barbara where they call all of these Spanish names like Camino Pescadero, and it's like that's not
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
whatever the language, accent, etc. The language evolves. That's why it's so fascinating.
It is the most ironic thing if there are racist people in California who say we speak English here, because you just have to go, what state are you in, man? What are you talking about? What city are you in? What are you talking about? Everything here is named. They're all Spanish words, dude. It's fine.
All of them. All of them.
Well,
Well,
here in Santa Monica.
Everything, exactly.
But I think it's interesting because you kind of talk about, this is such a huge theme, and I don't want to lose it. Like this idea of there are a lot of descendants of slaves who do pick up Greek names or pick up more biblical names. You'll meet a lot of Davids and Michaels and Samuels and all of those different things. So I think it's really interesting thematically in the book. Also, there's a lot of biblical things and themes in the book as well that are really on point. And I think it's so interesting because this particular situation are people who really are really the definition of Afrofuturist. Like they see the future and they love this concept in the cosmos so much that I love that their names fit the character of their character.
I did a little research if people are interested. So Horus is the falcon-headed god. He is the god of basically his eye was the morning star representing power and quintessence, and the left eye was the moon or evening star representing healing. But what I found really interesting in my research was that he is specifically the son of Osiris and Isis. And then I went to Hippolyta, and Hippolyta is also more known as being the daughter of two main gods, Ares and goddess Antiope. And she is she's more of a representative of being a child of the gods.
And in a modern geeky context, Rachel pointed this out, Hippolyta or Hippolyta is also the mother of Wonder Woman, Diana. Yep. And in the TV show, the little girl is not Horus, but Diana, like Rachel pointed out. So that has to be a Wonder Woman reference.
I had to call that out, especially
well done.
Given her comics as well. And in the chat, NY X-Wing 38 says a lot of people also think of Jim Crow as a Southern only thing, but the show highlights it happens.
Yeah.
Yep.
West.
And the interesting thing, I actually did some study in law school on the urban layouts of Chicago, and it's very interesting if folks study Chicago and Detroit, particularly in the late 40s and 50s during the Great Migration, and how that developed into a lot of the housing stuff they're dealing with still right now. Wow. The Black tax is really, really real, right? Like they talk about this in the book, this idea, like, for instance, my grandfather couldn't get a loan my grandfather, who was a carpenter, who built houses, couldn't get a loan to get a house. And so he had to raise all of his money to buy the property and then build the house himself. And so you're talking about a lot of times these banks just would not lend, particularly not just if you were Black, but you were a Black woman. And so you'd get into these usury situations, which now manifest just like, your cash checking places, that it hasn't ended, right? And it's very interesting seeing this dynamic, how they develop Letitia, particularly in the book, on being such a strong character and being so unmovable, because she did, and they reference it in the book, it's what's called pioneering, where you move into these neighborhoods. And what he doesn't reference in the book, which I think is interesting, he doesn't specifically call it white flight. But white flight is one of the reasons why suburbs became such a big deal, because folks moved out of the inner city. And so it was very interesting seeing how this develops in tandem with this very weird ghost story that we don't realize is at first connected to everything else.
Yeah, it was fascinating to read this section. Great comments in the chat. The Tamaranian said, the not mortgage really threw me. It's a mortgage, but not. And if you default, we keep all your money and take your house. Go
It's
ahead.
a contract. It's not a mortgage.
Yeah.
It is what a mortgage is an agreement that's got terms that allows for allowances here and there that has a certain percentage on it. What a contract is, unless you fulfill everything in this contract, then you own nothing, right? And a lot. This happens so much, and I hate to say it really is akin to being a shark. It's very akin to, oh, you got money from the mafia? Yeah, you got money from the mafia. Like, and a lot of times, like, and we won't go into it, but that you had artists back in the day from like Black artists back in the day had to do the same thing to get the money to print their own records, because you weren't walking into, and in some cases there were Black banks. We you know, Tulsa is also mentioned in this book. There were places where there was accumulation, that Black communities held money. It still happens today. Like Baltimore actually had its own currency for a minute. It's a whole nother, again, the whole nother conversation. But you get into this idea of like, yeah, if you don't fulfill the whole contract,
you're set up to fail. I mean,
yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, Brad Easton says in the chat, yes, it was very informative and shocking that this was a part of our American history. And S. Marcy says, I loved how cleverly that ending of the section ended with the chess game ending when the people across the street moved away. Which I was like, that's true. I mean, that's where this side of US history is where that very racist, cliched phrase comes from. There goes the neighborhood. That's what that's referring to, is when non-white people would move into a neighborhood and then the white people would be like, oh, well, there goes the neighborhood. We have to leave. It's now white flight. We have to go. And I was so conflicted reading this section, because on the one hand, I'm like, Letitia, stick it out. Come on, stick it out. On the other hand, I'm like, it's a ghost. I would be out of there in 2 seconds. What are you doing? This is a ghost story. What are you doing, people? It's a ghost.
I found the 3 men who had targeted harassment and started off with vandalizing and then literally was going to burn the house on fire. I found that
the little boys, that's the worst part. They were all teenagers.
Yeah, I found that to be scarier than the ghost. And it's like, at least the ghost listened when Letitia spoke.
Yeah.
No, I think
there was compromise.
The specter of not just racism, but racist people, and how many times they've been put in danger just for existing or trying to live, feels infinitely scarier than any ghost or monster. And you can see it in parallels today. And when people, you know, discuss issues today and are like, well, that, sorry.
Get it.
Like, you know, get over it, or that doesn't happen, or blah, blah, blah. It's like all of this is built in.
Yeah.
It's all built into our laws, into our police, into our systems, into everything that is happening. And it just feels really like, I just wish that, you know, the racist dude that replied to our post about us doing Nerdist Book Club that Maude called out, like, I just wish you would read the book and watch the show, because maybe you would actually connect if you can't now. Like, I mean,
and it's hard, right? It's hard when you have, and while I loved the help, and why I say loved, I mean, help is hella problematic. The help was hella problematic. You know, there has been a very long, this is an exception to the rule. There has been a very long track record since Uncle Tom's Cabin of other people, even Ain't I a Woman, never said that. For the record, go back and read the original piece. She never said Ain't I a Woman. That was actually changed by another white journalist to make it catchier, right? So when you think about the history of it, it's so interesting. I can tell that this person was extremely intentional about telling this story. And that is an exception to the rule in a lot of cases. And I also think that's why the show itself ramps up 110% on just like addressing it from the very moment we start, even though you have these differences. Did you catch it? Well done, Maude.
Wow.
Well done. Well done. But I think that also comes through in, you know, Dreams of Witch House, right? Like this idea of at this time, Letitia is not supposed to be able to do anything she did in this chapter. When the firemen get to the house, they don't ask her if she's okay. They don't ask her, do you, like, they're like, are you the help?
She's like, no, I'm the owner. And then Atticus walks in. Oh, so you must know more than she does, or yeah. Do you?
Because you're a man.
Do you own it then? And she's like, and he's like, no, it's still her. She's been telling you she owns it. I'd listen to her. Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting, and I think that's why I like this chapter so much, because Rachel, Hector, same conflict, same conflict. I was like,
get out.
Yo, I want you to make it. Like, I want you to stick this out, but also, like, part of me is like, oh, you're doing what every Black woman does. You go in, you pioneer, you stick it out, and then you're just tired. You're just tired, and now you're playing chess with the ghost. Like, how did we get here? Like,
but Rose, I think it was like the fact that there was Rose and Letitia, and Rose gunned it. She, like, this was an opportunity.
Ruby was like,
yeah, but I thought it was really interesting that, like, they fought for the house and they actually got something, by all accounts, they should never have gotten. And then as soon as the ghost happened, she's just like, nah, I am not staying here. Even though, and like, Letitia's like, are you kidding me? This is an amazing house. This is such a good opportunity. Like, let's just sort the ghost thing out. I hear what you were saying, but I actually really, like, I guess appreciated, or was like, I get you, the analogy of the chess piece, how, like, the whites played first. And I was just like, man.
I love that.
Yeah. I was like, that's
but I also love the analogy too, and I think I don't want people to miss this, of kind of also that civil rights movement and of the suffragette movement. Like, if you really think about it, like, Black women marched to the suffragette movement to get rights for women, but not for themselves. And she's like, no, I'm sticking it out. I'm not leaving. She gets a dog. Like, she's Atticus to move in. Like, and there's this undertow of I will not be moved. That is so strong and so core to, like, something that was referenced in episode 1, where Letitia talks about how it was 1 where she's fighting with Marvin. And she says, I use that money to bail people out of jail who were protesting. And that's the ethos that I got from Letitia as a character in the book of, I get it. I'm not going, either you gonna kill me, I'm gonna haunt this place, or I'm gonna live and we gonna live in harmony, or we just gonna fight every night. But, like, I didn't fought too hard. I'm not going anywhere.
It was almost like a moment out of, like, a scary movie, the way that she was able to talk back to the ghost to be like, I will haunt you. And then the ghost, like, stopped. The ghost kind of pulled back, because the ghost had to, like, think about it, like,
but I mean, with such conviction that he believed it.
I mean, Hector, do you want an angry Black woman haunting you every night of your life? No.
I don't want anybody haunting me, but especially not an angry Black woman haunting me.
I like the ghost. I would be like, let's talk to the ghost. I don't know. But I do think I like that the ghost ends up, pulling these boys away and scaring everyone. It's like, don't fuck with this house, man. And I appreciate that. And I also feel like it could be anyone, but because it's the Winthrop house, and because we know that Papa Winthrop, we don't know what happened to the brother or the son, correct?
No.
I don't think so.
So I have some speculation.
Yeah, because there's a Caleb. There's this family rivalry, something where there's a photo of the papas together, these evil weirdo called papas, and but then in the next section, they're trying to get something that Winthrop had. Caleb is trying to get this book that Winthrop had, and so my thinking is we're gonna see the Winthrop son pop up somewhere, and perhaps he's William. I don't know.
He was missing the hand in the portrait. I also thought that was really, really cool. I love that there's like clues in the house too.
Well, I love the fact, like, the clue was that he was wearing a ring with this on it.
What is it?
Some kind of a button, a gold button.
He It was silver though. So the colors are different in the book, but he had a symbol of the sons of Adam on that ring.
Mhm.
Because I think the interesting thing too, I definitely think the son is coming back. I definitely want to know what the deal was and who won that chess game, because I think that was
the mom is the dead wife that died, but like they don't really get
because they don't know what happened to the wife
before she got to the house. But to me, as a reader of mysteries, I'm like, no, she probably got murdered in the house before it was finished being built.
Yeah.
In the elevator. It's got to be the elevator. There's been too many things
I was like, but you built an elevator, but she was dead before. No.
So I think that he murdered her or his experiments caused her to die or something. But I feel like she's caught up in it, especially because the Adamites don't welcome women. There's no women, and that's playing into
Right.
well.
Yeah.
So I feel like to me, I thought was a lady, because I was like, lady meets lady, and you're like, okay, all right.
I like this theory.
Nathan S in the chat says maybe in a ritual.
Oh, that's a lot of people don't survive.
Ooh.
And if there's any burn markings in the house as well,
that's how you know.
Yeah,
there's some very weird paintings of Eve back in that village, so who knows?
Yeah,
exactly.
And the pagan fountain, and then getting into the secret room in the museum, which gave me extreme Edgar Allan. That's the next section, but
yeah.
I want to talk about this heist so bad. I love a good heist chapter.
Let's jump into it. I think we're all in agreement. I'm also hoping too that, like, just because Letitia has this house and is dealing with this ghost, that she's not going to be like take a backseat in the story. I'm hoping that she's still going to be involved in other characters' stories, for the end till the end of the book. Atticus goes to tell Mr. Archibald, the white realtor, like he just goes on his instinct and he's like, "You tell Caleb to leave Letitia alone." Because he went straight there, and I was like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Like that's what he did. So that's the end of that section. Rachel?
Yeah, I also just feel like Caleb is trying to orchestrate all of this by sending the money.
Yep.
And then mysteriously, Archibald gets the other realtor, Mr. Bailey.
Oh, the dickhead.
No, he gets the
Mr. Bailey, the other one that gets arrested and they held him in the back of the police car for 2 hours.
Oh, he's the good one, not the dickhead. Yes.
Yeah.
So he's the one that's the realtist, because you can't be a realtor as a Black person at that time.
Yeah.
Wow. So then this next section, I want to talk about this next section for the next 5 or 6 minutes, and then we can give Maude some time to finish that last 7 minutes of the show. This next section is Zelda. Zelda wants to see it, Maude. You better let Zelda.
Is wanted.
Yeah. Abdullah's book. This section I didn't like as much as as the haunted house section. However, it opened and ended with some stuff that was so impactful for me that I want to talk about, because the heist in the middle, it was really fun and exciting. I had a little bit of a tough time wrapping my brain around it when they talked about some of those very Lovecraftian rules of how there was a rope, but it wasn't taut, but it was through a hole and all this other stuff. And they were floating and everything. It was very fun, but it opened with a book of names, or rather like the book of the slave labor that the family was keeping track of, which blew my mind.
So that is not something that is unusual. So it was very interesting for me. Like the most impactful part of that chapter was the letter at the very beginning. And this happened a lot. I've heard of it more with sharecroppers, because there was an immediate deal at the beginning. Basically, sharecropping is like you're not a slave anymore. We'll give you some money. You can stay in our land if you want, work the field. We'll give you part of the profits. A lot of people never saw those profits, or they're like, well, we charged you rent, we charged you food, we gave you clothes, we had this dentist. So even in that understanding of, for the dentist appointment, for this, for rent, and it was so interesting. I was like, oh wow, this is a new aspect that I don't think people really care about. Is at the end of the day, a lot of times free people are freed people, because free people are born out of slavery and freed people were freed. Where they just pay me my due and I'll leave, and I'll leave you be, and I don't need anything else, but pay me what my due is. And that entire, I feel like it stops a little bit in the middle of the heist, and I hear you, Hector, because there's like a point where I'm like, oh, all right, so Mortimer is just in the air, and there's a torpedo, and the torpedo goes in the dude's back. Okay, cool. But then the end of the chapter happens, and I'm like, with interest, you say?
With interest. It's supposed to be what, like $11,000, and it ended up being 300 and something thousand. And like when you were looking at also like the inflation, that's what I was like. They've technically been paid like sort of what, like $7 million or the equivalent of. Yeah.
I think the crazy thing for me, go ahead.
Just the part that got me was the last sentence of this section, right? 300,000. He said $300,000. Son of a bitch, said Montrose. Like that right there made me understand that this is full-on manipulation from Caleb. This is not the way things should be. This is a horrible thing for Caleb to do, to provide these reparations in this context, in this way, and yet it's $300,000. Again, I'm conflicted, like the ghost thing. I'm like, get out of the ghost house, but also stay there. And if it were me, I'm like, $300,000. Okay, cool. Your guys' life is set, but it's not going to be this easy because it's Caleb, and there's this ulterior motive, and this whole larger story. But that Montrose going, son of a bitch, made me just like, it took me back, and I went, oh man, I cannot wait to see how these characters are going to deal with this and what this could mean for the rest of the story. So those are very They're
blackmailing them, and
yeah. Ooh, look at this comment from Wes in the chat. Wesley Marshall said, I looked that up. It would have been $3 million now today.
Wow. Well, and that's the crazy thing, right? Because at the end of the day, it's like you look at it and you go, does this equate to what I'm gonna have to go through if I take this?
Yep.
All we wanted was the book back.
But still, they're taking what's theirs.
Yeah.
But with they know, because the whole thing is orchestrated to get this one object. And so it feels like once you are, even if you are not actually indebted and you are owed this, that's not Caleb's mentality. Caleb is not doing
Caleb's buying them.
He's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart because he believes that they deserve reparations for the horrific things that they have been through. He's doing it so he has them on the hook, so he can be like, well, I gave you this money.
And I think it's also interesting.
Sacrifice a bunch of virgins. Who knows what he's gonna do? But like,
we're gonna cut open Atticus. But I think what I don't want to miss this out of this chapter. One of the things this chapter does is bring you through something that I haven't really seen a genre book do.
Right.
Which is talk about the realism of what happened to different people after the Civil War and how that impacted the history of their families. And then he's like, oh, and for good measure, we're going to put Tulsa, Oklahoma in it, and then talk about how this family's heritage and history has made it through the swamps of the South, has made it through being born into slavery, has made it through moving out to the West Coast, coming back, going to Tulsa, going through the Tulsa massacre, and why that has impacted their personalities like that being part of character development.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Sorry.
Really quickly in the comments, Miss Necromancer says, I love Angelique so much. She's so cool and dropping wisdom and pretty. And then Clever Girl says, Angelique is awesome. I love her comments. In saying that, great to announce that Angelique is going to be joining us for the Geekbomb after show as well. We have so much more to talk about. We barely kind of touched on the Freemasons side of the second story.
Yeah. I feel like behind the scenes, we should talk about the breakdown of chapters and also how we get Angelique back.
Well, here's everybody's homework for next week. Your homework is going to be to read the next two sections of the book, Jekyll and Hyde Park and The Narrow House. So stop at the section called Horace and the Devil Doll. Oh man, it's going to get so creepy. You can watch our previous episodes.
And I was like,
Oh, okay. Calm down, Rachel. You guys can watch previous episodes of our show on Nerdist and Geeky Century's YouTube or Geeky Century's Twitch. Make sure that you like and subscribe. And like Maude said, straight after this, we're heading over to the after show on Geekbomb's Discord to jump into the book club chat for a little Q&A. Angelique, thank you again so much for joining us. Where can everybody find you and your work online?
Awesome. Well, you can find, and thank you for having me. I'm sorry I talk so much. I love this book so much.
No, it's so good.
You can find me at angeliqueroche.com, at Angelique Roche on Twitter, and at Angelique Roche Official on the grams.
Very nice. Well, guys, thank you again for watching. We got to cut it a little bit early so that Maude can watch at least 3 minutes of the end of episode 2. And we will see you guys next week. Bye.